So I recently had the opportunity to go on it's the Krystal Kyle and Friends podcast, right? That's the total thing, right? And I'm actually super happy with how it went. Conversationally, it was about 90 minutes. It was an interview format. They asked questions of me, and yeah, that makes me the friend. Actually, they asked questions of me, and the questions were, I mean, they ranged pretty. I mean, they were like the kind of questions you would expect. I imagine, how'd you get your start? How are you here? What do you like to do? What are your political positions? And then the stuff we tended to disagree a little bit more on: Bernie or bust, force the vote, my positions on rising, like that kind of stuff. Anyway, I think it went really well. The thing that I'm happiest about is that I think I was able to really convincingly deliver all the affirmative positions I have on some really important issues related to like the Nosbol vortex type thing. So the positions that I tried to hit on really, really hard were the idea that right populism is a sham, that it has no institutional support, and even when like non politicians push it, it's like this was the line I think I used. It's like you can talk with a right populist and agree for 40 minutes on everything. Oh yeah, the government doesn't represent the interests of the people. Oh yeah, our democracy is flawed. Oh yeah, corporations are autocratic and they strip democracy from our system, et cetera, et cetera. And then like you'll be 40 minutes in and you'll be like, oh wow, this guy agrees with me on a lot. And then you'll mention Black Lives Matter and they'll be like, oh yeah, we need to roll in the National Guard to deal with those degenerates. Those rioters can't be allowed to continue burning down our cities. And you're like, whoa! Whoa there. And it's like they have all of these convictions that seem like they overlap with ours, with left populists. But then the moment a culture war issue comes up, they drop everything and they run to like the farthest right. And the funny thing is, I think Kyle actually directly agreed with me on that. Like said he'd noticed that as well, which I appreciated the injunction from him. Because that's a problem that I have. I don't think that right populism is like a real political movement in this country. I think, and I drew the historical allegory as well. The most effective right populists in history were the neo. Sorry, I keep saying neo Nazis reflexively. The real Nazis, the Nazis, not neo Nazis, the original ones. Because if you take a look at the rhetorical strategies of the Nazi Party before they came to power, they were like super pro-worker. If you take a look at all the tenants, like what were they promising the German worker? They were like, yeah, yeah, we're talking unions, we're talking workers' representation, we're talking like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then they come to power, and then all the Strasserites go, and all of a sudden workers' rights are off the table. So it seems like historically, right populism is just a mask that fascists put on to get the working class behind them until they have enough power that they don't need to fake it anymore. Yeah. Um so I brought that up. I thought, I mean, a salient point. Um so anyway, some people were critical, saying that I went too soft on Krystal and Kyle, which I totally sympathize with that point. I understand, but I wholeheartedly disagree with it. Because what this was it was a rhetorical challenge I was unfamiliar with, okay? So, how do I express criticisms when speaking with two people whose affirmative positions are almost identical to mine, but whose behaviors differ from mine in some notable ways, particularly with Krystal, much more Krystal than Kyle? Because if you sat Krystal Ball down in a room with me and asked us basic political questions about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, about fascism, about this, about that, about Medicare for all, about unions, et cetera, we're going to sound very similar. Of course we will. The problem is the ways in which we express those positions. Excuse me, sorry, headache. The context in which we deliver those ideas. So in that context, how do you challenge positions? And in my mind, I tried to do the same thing I did with Tim Pool. Guys, remember Tim Pool? Tim Pool has said some ostentatiously stupid shit. Not just stupid. I mean, you all are perfectly aware of my opinion on Tim Pool's political advocacy. This is no mystery to people. But when I went on there, you'll notice, especially for the first 20 to 30 minutes, I only talked affirmative positions. I only spoke about what I believed and tried to find common ground with him. The argument with Tim Pool, it only really came up when he began to challenge the affirmative positions that I made. Exact same thing with Jesse Lee Peterson. Now, Jesse Lee Peterson is borderline neo Nazi, you know? But when I talked with him, do I focus on that? No. We make strong affirmative positions and challenge them to disagree with us. And the reason why I think that works, and this was my thought process going in, is imagine you're a viewer of Krystal and Kyle who's not a viewer of me. Now, in all likelihood, you've probably heard of me. I'm big enough that that's the case. And you've probably heard the things people say about me. You know, I have a contentious reputation, to put it charitably. You've probably heard that I'm a debate lord, that I'm argumentative, that I'm aggressive, and that I'm uncharitable. These are probably things that you've heard. I see these thrown around about me pretty often in these circles, right? Now, the people who have these preconceptions of me, these are the people I want to reach. So my goal would be to go on there and to present my opinions in a way that don't trip any red flags from them. Because if I go on there, excuse me, and the first 30 minutes of the conversation, of the interview, I mean, is us like agreeing on all these affirmative positions, but then I'm like, but hold on, Krystal, you've done some really bad stuff in the past. And then like it starts going into the weeds on that. Rhetorically, that is an almost impossible situation to win. Because then all the people watching who have negative preconceptions about me will go, oh, here we go. And in their minds, they've heard these criticisms before, and they have like internal defenses to them. You know, I can say, I think that Krystal is too charitable to Saga or whatever. And in their heads, and in Krystal's response, they can be, well, that's not true. Here are 87 times that I disagreed with them. And they'd be correct. Krystal has disagreed with Saga plenty of times. It gives them an easy out to ignore my positions. So instead, I thought, the best way to move people over, statistically, stochastically, the best way to give people my positions isn't to outright challenge the negative behavior that I've seen, but rather to give affirmative positions that might make them more critical of bad behavior in the future. So if I'm saying, I don't think right populism is a real thing, we need to agree on solutions rather than on existing problems, we have to make Republicans politically irrelevant, etc., etc., I'm being convincing with these arguments, I'm giving people the tools to identify bad positions in the future. And to me, that's way more valuable than going on there and just trying to get like every dunk I can fit on a little like, you know, sheet of paper on. So that was my thought going into it, you know. It's the when you have the opportunity to talk to people on whom you've spoken about in the past, my priority is to make sure that you adjust the rhetoric to match the needs of the situation, as long as you don't back off any positions that you hold, which I don't think that I did. You know, I certainly hold the same positions that I did. I actually, at one point, expected things to go a little bit more antagonistic. When I brought up downplaying of the January 6th Capitol riots, I expected her to have some, like, retort or, like, single that point out. And I was ready, if she did that, to, like, go into it, because I felt like then she would have prompted it. But she didn't. It seemed like that point mostly sailed by. Maybe I could have hit on that one a little harder, because she really did downplay the January 6th riots. And she's downplayed the big lie from Trump, the idea that the election was stolen, that kind of thing. But if I start like listing out all the problems, everyone watching, like, they roll their eyes like, okay, we know where this goes. So, yeah. You still believe Krystal is a grifter? I can't tell, and it's a criticism I think I have to stop making because it's non-falsifiable. This is a problem that I've noticed when other people criticize me as well. It's like, do some people behave in ways that seem grifty to me? That's sure, but how do you prove me wrong on that? Right? That's the problem. It's not whether or not I believe it or not. It's that since there's no way to disprove that statement, it makes me like, do I hold on to it when people argue against it, or do I say, oh well, I don't really know and make myself look weak? Of course, I don't really know. You can never know people's intentions. Um, yeah, it eventually becomes a dogmatic insistence. So it's not about whether or not I believe it. It's just about, is this the position I want to waste rhetorical energy defending, you know? That sort of thing. Even if even if I was talking to like Jimmy Dore, I think Jimmy Dore is like a huge POS. I mean, and the the extent to which Jimmy Dore has like polluted left-leaning discourse is almost immeasurable. I really don't like Dore, okay? But if like I called him a grifter and then I went on his show and he's like, "You call me a grifter? I'm not a grifter. I believe in that." Like, how do I disprove? How do I argue that point? You know, like, like, I, I actually can't. It's not actually possible for me to actually do that. So yeah, just it just seems like a difficult position to hold. Well, Dore would be the one yelling and losing his shit. Well, with Jimmy Dore, because he has the self-control of an infant, I know that if I ever actually talk to him, which he'll never do because he's a coward, things would instantly go blood sportsy, by the way. So that's fine. If we ever talk to Jimmy Dore, it would just be me reading like the archival scroll of all the stupid stuff he said. So in that case, sure. But I think with the Krystal and Kyle thing, I really do think it went pretty well. I'm happy I was given the opportunity to present my case like that. I saw some people who seemed upset I criticized Biden, which, oh God, the community I've cultivated, right? I feel like my criticisms of Biden were completely appropriate in the context of that discussion. I think I was even charitable to Biden, like relatively speaking. I said like it's not so much about whether or not Biden is capable of single-handedly doing all these things or fixing all these problems, because he's not. It's to what extent is Biden repping these progressive ideas? How often does he talk about them? And he doesn't. A lot of the progressive shit that he promised, like he's kind of dropped a little bit, or he's not walked back on, but like he's gotten quieter about it. Um, Maybe that'll change with time, but it's something worth criticizing him for. Vaush, my problem was mainly the Rising's existence is meant to push the idea that the Dems and Republicans are the same and equally part of the establishment. You agreeing with Kyle on the Dems being pretty harmful because it adds that idea. Well, I did agree the Dems are bad, but I was way harder on the Republicans. What I said about the Democrats is the Democrats don't do enough. We have to push them harder. What I said about the Republicans is they're insane. Marjorie Taylor Greene is the future of the Republican Party, and they need to be made politically irrelevant. So, and I think that's the good thing to do. You can criticize the Democrats, but you have to make it clear the Republicans are way worse, which they are. And I think I did do that. And I didn't get pushback either when I made those comments about the Republican Party, which if I'd gotten pushback, I would have been hard on that because, yeah, the Republican Party's a death cult. But I didn't. So those statements hang in the air. And I think that works just fine. Yes, Joe Biden has been a sussy baka, as it were. Why don't we get rid of Democrats and Republicans? With what magic? What? Look, let's work on making the Republican Party as politically irrelevant as we can. I feel like that's step one. This is another thing that I'm proud of. I was very specific about my movement forward. I want to make the Republican Party irrelevant so that we can relegate progressive discourse versus moderate Democrat discourse to the only relevant political discourse taking place in America. My argument is that the presence of the Republican Party, the threat they pose to our democracy, is a bludgeon that Democrats can use to force us towards the electable moderate position. And that's true. It's good cop, bad cop. Republicans are the bad cop, and Democrats say, hey, come on. Come with us, all right? It's better than that, isn't it? So if the Republican Party is made politically irrelevant, well, then the Democrats don't have that excuse anymore. The Democrats can't say, oh, no, you have to go with Joe Biden instead of Bernie Sanders, because otherwise Trump's going to win when the Republican candidates are getting 25% of the vote every national election. It doesn't work anymore. So now we get to really have that discourse. And that's what I'm pushing for. I think that's a really good point forward. It's a criticism of the Democratic Party while acknowledging that the Republican Party is infinitely worse. Yes. The Democrats need to remove the structural barriers that help Republicans hold on to power. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But anyway, does everyone get the rhetorical the rhetorical strategy that I went in with there? I saw a lot of people like hardcore mauling about it online when they saw the one segment, which I admit, the first YouTube segment, the one where it says Vaush criticizes the rising to Krystal's face, I feel like that segment was, well, I mean, it was bait, the clickbait, of that title, because the broader conversation wasn't so much about the criticism of Rising as it was pushing forward all of the affirmative positions I have that would make people critical of rising. So maybe it sets people's expectations up incorrectly. But one way or another, I think it was pretty good. I'm happy with it. So if the Republican Party ceases existence, would you be fine with the Democrats splitting into two separate parties, one leftist party and one lib, more moderate party? Sure, or it can be one party and just infinite discourse within. But I also want to get rid of first past the post voting, so we wouldn't just have one or two relevant parties. We could have many relevant parties. And I think that'd be good. Oh, and by the way, to everyone who subbed recently because of the Krystal, Kyle, and Friends thing, maybe some of you are watching right now. Actually, I'm going to take a look at YouTube chat. Are any of you here for the first time because of you seeing me on that conversation? I got to jump in subs. I know statistically it seems like some of you would be here. For those of you who are here, howdy. I see yeses in there. Howdy, howdy. Yeah, how do you like the conversation? And because people are going to bring it up, you can go back. There are videos where I've criticized Krystal Ball in the past. I've been extremely harsh with her. And the language that I use in those criticisms is definitely well beyond the type of rhetoric that I think is effective in the kind of engagement that I had with Krystal and Kyle there. The underlying criticisms, I stand by pretty much 100%. That's the thing that matters to me. Take the message. The message is what matters. The actual content of the message, more so than the optimal rhetoric used to deliver it at the time. I actually talked a little bit with Krystal before the recording started about the old stuff of stuff that was said about her. So that was interesting. I'll say this much: in the future, with Krystal and Kyle, now that I've reached a point where I've spoken to them directly, I think I'm going to try and speak on whatever criticisms I have on the baseline assumption that we're working towards a common goal. Now, again, because I said the grifter thing is non-provable, it's non-falsifiable, I can never know whether or not that's the case. But I think from now on, that's going to be the strategy to go. If there's a disagreement, it's like, I feel like this could have been done better, Which maybe that's less bloody, and I know people like the blood, but I think we're at a point now where that would be a more effective strategy to take. With not just with Krystal, with basically everyone on the left. You know? Pretty much everyone who's not like on the right, except for Jimmy Dore. We can always go hard on Jimmy Dore, okay? I have completely written off Jimmy Dore in my head. I do not care what happens in the future unless we see a huge turnaround from Jimmy Dore's channel. It's all harsh on him, okay? And actually, there are a lot of other people about whom I feel the same way, but whatever. Anyway. Oh, and if you're new, come join the site, Vaush.gg. Take a look at all these cool frogs people post. Look. Wow. Look at the frogs. Look at these frogs. Come on. Can't get that in YouTube chat. Look at that. And they combo when they type the same frog twice. Good stuff.